investing in shitcoins. Like, what is the return on this? What do I
Yep.
think the ceiling is on doing this? As opposed to just like, I tweeted even yesterday, the next thing is what leads to like the air quotes next thing. Like, just
Mm-hmm.
do the next thing and see what it leads to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it has doing helps reveal what to do next quite a lot. And then, yeah, anyone who I think enjoys thinking and coming up with ideas, and I definitely fell into this trap for the first couple of years of Zora. It's like you can start constructing a very complex and exciting version of the future that gets increasingly detached from reality. So then you get
Yep.
stuck in your thought space versus just bringing it back down to like, wait, what are we actually doing today and what can we do today? Super clarifying. so,
Yeah,
so yeah,
honestly.
resonates.
How about you
Um,
though? How's the year been so far?
it's been great. I think was able to have some genuine time off over the holiday break. And then I think we launched a few things in December that have like shown signs of life and really starting to work. So like I was kind of looking at the metrics and because I can help myself every day and like things are growing really well and more people it's like the first time that people are starting to like really use Zora themselves without like doing like manual outreach and DMs and like lots of hand, all that kind of stuff. It's like I'm seeing like, oh wow, I love this person, and holy shit, the link in the reply is to a Zora link. How the fuck did that happen? That's crazy. It keeps happening, and I'm like, oh well, this is new, and I'm very excited by it and trying to keep running with it. And yeah, just like really listening to like what people are asking for, what they enjoy, what they don't enjoy, and yeah, I feel like it's been really easy to just kind of hit the ground running because there's momentum. So we're just trying to run with that momentum as much as we can. And yeah, kind of picking up where we left off last year, which was a great year. So it's good start
Man,
so far.
beautiful to hear. But last year was, I mean, that was a whirlwind. When I think back, I took 3 weeks off at the end of last year as well to kind of just decompress and kind of annualize review. And just so much happened at Zora. Like
Mm-hmm.
so like and I'm not even like kicking a dead horse. I'm just actually using it because it is like the thing to compare it to. Like you compare it to like what OpenSea has accomplished. And I'm with you. I've seen you talk about it before. Like I'm with you that there's a certain level of regard and respect that I feel should be offered to OpenSea for what they have done since 21. But that doesn't necessarily stop the comparison of like um, kind of that like you can't live at the mountaintop analogy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Zora's almost like it feels like a wave. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
there's this new thing. Let's crescendo. Boom. Okay, we captured that. Now we coming back down. All right, what's the next wave? Let's crescendo. Boom. And then it's like it just keeps happening and happening and happening.
Mm-hmm.
And interestingly enough, I just threw something in the Zora Farcaster channel, which makes me want to ask, like, how much do you feel that Farcaster has played a part in what you just talked about? Like having a Zora dedicated channel?
That's great question. Um, I mean, the immediate reaction is like, I think quite a significant part, actually.
Mhm.
I think there was a few, like, why was 2023 very different for us? I think boiled down to we came into the year, like 2022 was like very deep bear market and kind of like the earliest versions of Zora, I think were like literally declared dead in a lot of ways. And like when just looking at the metrics and the space, it was kind of like, well, shit, this is a bear market. That's usually an amazing opportunity. If we wanted to build what we think is the most exciting version of the future for us, like what would that look like really? And how do we, what were the learnings and clues and hints from the first mania and and then how do we build around that? Um, and this will relate to the Farcaster thing because I think we came into the 2023 with a strong opinion that so the secondary market was like kind of the dominant story for 2021, but it was really hard for creators to actually bring things on chain. So like focusing in on the primary market and the creator tool experience was something that we were just like naturally good at and like known for. But there was a lot of room for experimentation. Um, and the second big little decision was kind of like, well, one, collectibles were kind of like the dominant form factor, but we increasingly see like media and content coming on chain. So like the categories changing. So the UX should change. Like marketplace UX is horrible content and media UX. So like focusing on that. And then 3, like, yeah, just experimenting on the market models, because crypto's superpower is like revealing the value of things, and you need the most effective market model possible. So moving from like one of ones to timed editions and these more kind of open, liquid networked form was a big part. So they were the strong opinions coming into it, but then you have to kind of face the reality of what's your current user experience and how do people relate to that. And Farcaster became this amazing place where I could just ask very genuinely, like, what do you like about Zora? What do you hate about Zora? What is confusing? What do you want changed? And, why is that the case? And I think I asked that question repeatedly, probably once every 2 to 3 months. And that was more or less like a 50 to 60% input into our roadmap. Because it was so easy, because it's like, one, I couldn't really ask those questions on Twitter because for whatever reason, it's just not the right context for that type of discussion. You're more likely to get like, you're just gonna get surface level answers. But I think Farcaster is at a point where the mix of people and the context just leads to like very thoughtful responses. I think that's something that's just like valued on that app or in that community. So yeah, it was like, hey, we just shipped this thing, like thoughts, comments, feedback. Hey, we was like, I'm thinking ahead for the next 3 months, like what do you want to see? And because I knew the kind of the quality of the responses and the thinking, and it was very genuine, I kind of weighted those opinions very heavily and just took them as direct inputs. And this is such an obvious startup lesson, which is just kind of like, just speak to people who use and love your tool very often and ask them what they don't like or what they do like or what needs to be improved. And you just do that. And it's just the most unreal like feedback loop, because you make the change, they feel heard, and then it's usually leveled up the experience in the exact way they want. So they can do the thing, and then the new things that they're doing lead to new problems or edges that they discover, and then you just kind of like in this really cool rhythm with the people using your product, and you can kind of run with it. But I think like my entire preface is important of like, we did have like strong opinions coming into it, because I think if you don't have a strong idea of what you're trying to build, then you'll end up in like building faster horses situation, where it's like maybe you actually optimize too far or like back yourself into a corner that you're not aware of. But like kind of grounding it in building the best creator tool with the best kind of collector and enjoying, like what's the most enjoyable way to actually kind of consume and look at and interact with these pieces of media and content and mints, kind of like helped ground it in a way. So yeah, and then I just like Farcaster generally as like as a technology and as a product and as a community. So yeah, I think I'd be on Farcaster anyway. But yeah, it's been, I think, really valuable in helping Zora over the past year for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting because in a way, it's like I'm starting to feel the same thing with Twitter. I'm not at your standing yet, so I still have a little bit more of like an intimate reply type of interaction with people. But to your point about like, it feels like, and correct me if I'm wrong, the best crowdsourcing that you got from Twitter was hopping in DMs, and
Yes.
kind of to that loop you're talking about of feeling seen. I can 100% affirm that the reason I, went so deep down the Zora rabbit hole is because you, one of the co-founders, was constantly in my DMs, actually listening to me before anybody else would listen to me, and would put something in play. And then it was gratifying to see other people receive it well. You're like, oh, this is wonderful. This place is different. They listen to me, especially because of my experience with like the hospitality industry and stuff. And you just see how tone deaf corporations get to their users. And so it honestly makes it like Farcaster channels, and you recommended Farcaster to me, and man, I wish I had jumped in even sooner, because I'm starting to, the mind is starting to fixate on the possibilities, but it's like a Farcaster channel is almost like a public DM.
Hmm.
You know, it's
Hmm.
like we're just we're just journaling here. It's intimate conversation. If you try to come in and get like if you try to be like clickbaity, I mean shit, you'll have Dan being like, this is a low effort reply. You know, like no one wants to
Right.
be like ousted like that. So it is fascinating, and it does make me think like like maybe you have a clearer understanding of it than I do. Like I'm not entirely even sure what social graph means. Like, what does that even mean?
Uh, it's the abstract term just to represent who's there and what are the relationships between them.
Okay.
Um, so if you imagine each person as like a dot, and then each connection, so like who you're following, who follows you, as like a line between those dots, that's like the most basic form of a social graph. And
Okay.
then it gets increasingly dense and diverse when you start introducing the connections of like an individual mint or a comment, and like you can imagine them as like different colored lines between people
Mm,
and connection between people, and even the pieces of content themselves. um, and the reason like that the word graph is used is because it's basically like how you rationalize it and design it and architect it from a technical standpoint. So it's like the technical language bubbling up to some extent. um, but
mm.
yeah, it's basically just the people and the things and how those people and things relate to each other.
So, okay, thank you for explaining. In a way, then we could potentially see a world where, let's stick with Zora. Zora is like the main vertice, and then say like no pattern podcast, or say this bear bull thing I just threw in before we hopped on takes flight. Like
Mhm.
in a way, Zora's channel could become like the main vertice, and then all those little lines could connect to sub channels specifically about, whatever, hosted content is being done on Zora itself.
Yeah, that's one visual illustration. I think another one is say like you create the based in early mint,
Mm,
which is created by you, and then there was tens of thousands of people who minted it. So that graph would show like you as the creator of this based in early thing, and then there'd basically be tens of thousands of dots around it that all have a line directly onto that mint or piece of content.
mm,
And now you imagine that across all of Zora, then you have like a pretty fascinating graph. Which I think like that graph has always been there. We just haven't made it particularly easy to see or rationalize. So it's like we're adding followers and following, years later to Zora, but we've like pre-filled it with your minting activity. So anyone who's minted one of your things is following you, and anyone you've minted from, you're following them as just like the starting point. But that was
mm.
like a pretty palpable thing to do and see and play with and test, because it's like, oh wow, like I think I sent this to you in a DM. It's like you're gonna have like 32,000
Yeah,
followers
yeah,
and like that's on-chain actions. Like that's what's even crazier about that. It's like it's not someone who just liked a tweet. That's someone who's done an on-chain
yeah.
mint. There's a
Wild.
lot of weight to that. And I think like why now is a cool time for that is that there's so many of those people who are minting that come back every month now, where it's like, oh wow, it's like it's not just like a fun number. It's like, no, they're real people that are coming to the website like very
Yeah.
often. So it's like, oh shit, we should probably hand these audiences over to the creators a little bit more and make it clear that they have that from what they've done. So yeah, that's kind of the
Yeah.
social play to some extent.
I mean, it's mind blowing. Like, you know, before I was using the model of like art collector, right? And I had a tweet a while ago where it's like, I've sold more work than Da Vinci, which is like tongue in cheek, right? But it's like 30,000 people collect something. How many people can collect like Van Gogh, et cetera, et cetera. But it is like a paradigm shift model I've been using of like the the landscape of what is happening to creativity itself is radically changing. Like
Yes.
to 30,000 people with weighted interaction, as you say, is, I mean, not novel in the sense that there are people who have had that amount of collecting, but you kind of know what I'm saying. Like, it's a novel instance of, at the starting gates of becoming a brand or an entity or something that exists in this new hyperstructure, hyperculture world. This is like totally different than how it was before, which dovetails perfectly into like, I, I have a hunch you've been thinking about this as well. Like, what paradigm shifts are we lagging on currently that would help accelerate this turnover and understanding? Like, the rules are changing, the game is looking different, it still plays by similar patterns, right? I produce content in media, you consume content in media, we share at XYZ, but fundamentally there are some like paradigm shifts occurring, and I've been trying to
Mm.
rack my brain around like which ones are some of the lagging ones that like on consensus we still need to make.
That's an interesting question. What do you mean by lagging? As in, like they seem still unsure if it's real or not, or just like slow in adoption, or
I
what do you
think a
mean by that?
combination of both, and then I guess maybe an example would articulate it better than I could, where it's like you and I are bought into minting, right? Like,
Mhm.
I like this thing I created, I minted. It doesn't have to be the most like valuable thing. I'm just minting it. And
Mhm.
that's a paradigm shift to say tweeting or posting on Instagram, where people don't even really think about it. They just post or tweet. But there's
Right.
something about the minting mechanic that requires a paradigm shift to be like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna mint.
Yes.
So it's like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah. I guess. Yeah. Like minting unequivocally feels like a thing, but it's like it's a know it when you see it or feel it type thing. Like it can actually be a little bit abstract or clunky to explain sometimes. Um, and it's just a starting point too. But yeah, like where to start here? Well, I think so. Like minting content is, I think, showing early signs of life because, in part, one of the things you said is like people already do this all the time. Like this has been around. Creating and consuming content on the internet is like the primary thing to some extent. But the past decade or more. Um, and what the minting pieces do, the minting media is like quite a cool bridge, I think, because you're already doing it. And I think we implicitly know that the stuff that we're creating is valuable. Like, and there's lots of fun little hints or inklings of language on like yeah, if you've seen TikTok, like in before viral, or
Mhm.
like Reddit meme economy, like people going long particular memes or forms of content, um, or like commenting first on like a YouTube video. Like I think that people implicitly know that there's like both social value and real economic value if it's being produced by this content. I mean, Meta and Google and Snapchat wouldn't be multi-billion-dollar companies if that wasn't the case. But we've
Yeah.
never really seen that value. Um, so I don't think it's. I think it's less controversial to say that like every piece of media has a non-zero value, but I think it's maybe more controversial to say that like, well, some of these are like multi-million, if not potentially $100 million pieces of content that should probably just be bought and sold on the internet versus being captured and bought and sold using the traditional IP system with like a company and copyright and licensing and all that kind of stuff. Um, so I think that's an interesting bridge. I think the parts that feel early and maybe lag, like I think, well, how to form this thought. Like it might be easier to see the adoption of minting when paired with forms of media or tools that are like very new or haven't existed before. So like one really obvious and almost like trite answer at this point is like combining it with like AI tooling, where it's
Mhm.
like, okay, we have AI models, we have AI tools like Midjourney and Dolly and stuff like that that can produce really interesting output. And that output, more often than not, actually is valued on chain already. Like, I think one of the greatest kind of, I'm saying the word hints and clues a lot because it's just this like fun mental model I've been playing with as a way to like look at what might be happening now or in the past, not as the final thing, but like hints of the future thing. And
Mhm.
like, it's always funny to me that, or like a really palpable clue is that the first ever things minted on Super Rare were AI artworks in 2018.
Mm-hmm.
And that those AI artworks are hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars now, by Videodrome, like Robbie Barrett. And I remember trying to bid on those back in the day, trying to like penny pinch like $150 or something like that. But it's like, and then, you know, Zora's experimented this a lot with like Holly Plus and minting a voice model and then helping kind of like mint the output and remix the output of that. Holly and Matt Dryhurst actually did a thing very recently where they took an entire model and toolkit and symbol and minted that into a single 3D object. And then you can basically create remixes and derivatives and outputs that include that specific object in it. But why I think that's like interesting is like the traditional copyright system and owning media just flat out doesn't work and is completely broken in that AI context. So like, I think it's an easier sell and it's already naturally happening there. So you don't have to, there's less gravity or conceptual friction to go up against because there's no existing mental models versus like speaking to a non-crypto person about minting their YouTube video is like, well, why would I do that? Like YouTube works. You know what I mean? So I think that that's one example. I think there's like a whole universe of other categories that we think about a lot that maybe we probably not worth just like going into each of them. But yeah, I think that's probably why. It's just, I think because minting is it's bridging an existing world with a new one, which I think is valuable in and of itself. But I think it's more likely that some of this growth will come from the net new pieces versus the existing stuff.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you bring up AI because I literally, you know, that I'm sure you saw that Rabbit R1 that came out, and I was already kind of working on an AI agent piece when it came out, so it kind of felt like serendipity telling me like, hey, just write the piece. And I guess I didn't really come away with any answers in there, more just like a ton of questions. I mean, I got so many questions at the beginning of the year, it's almost nauseating, but it really kind of only led me to, and I guess it kind of ties into what you're saying of what I do feel more certain on since kind of thinking through that paper is that I'm gonna interact with these AI agents with crypto. Like it doesn't make sense why I would do it with fiat or you know, a debit card or whatever. And so in a way, I guess that's a paradigm shift, right? Of like making people understand like eventually, whether people are against it or not right now, AI will become undeniable and there will be a significant value add to the individual's life that unless they're aged out of it, they will most likely start to embrace it. Right. Like a personal example for me, even, and I was, you know, as soon as Midjourney became available out of beta, I was on it. But if I were to like talk to one of my normie friends about it, the real selling point for me was like, I got tired of cooking salmon and a different vegetable and rice. I got so tired of just making that every day. So I said, hey, I have these ingredients still left that I always ignore in the pantry or the fridge. I have frozen chicken or beef or lamb or whatever. Can you make me an interesting fusion meal that only takes me 45 minutes or less to cook? And all of a sudden, my entire dietary world was flourishing. And since then, I know all kinds of weird hybrids like Vietnamese and Greek and all this like weird stuff that I would have never known before. And so that feels like that's coming for everybody eventually. That's within the like the age range that would embrace it, where there's something in their life that it's just going to be undeniable, that it opens up a whole new world of creativity. And to your point yesterday about age of imagination, something that like revitalizes imagination in the individual. And then it's like, well, when it's at that scale, what's the likeliest form of being able to pay for it? Because I assume there's going to be, you know, DAO like models, right? Like isn't I think Soren over at Titles is already working on it with the one that he set up on Hypersub, where it's like it seems likely that there's going to be collective models that are trained and built by a whole bunch of people globally. And it's like, what's that going to happen on Web 2 servers or crypto? And it's like most likely crypto.
Right. Well, like Web 2 is actively fighting against it, right? Like there's going to be Supreme Court cases of,
Yeah,
New York Times versus GPT. So it's like it's clearly broken. But yeah, I think like titles is a great example. Another great example. I actually think OPEPN fits in this category
Hmm.
for me, actually, as like a reference, because um, there was the core symbol of OPEPN, and then Nouns AI came out and made it really easy for people to remix the OPEPN symbol in a way that was recognizable, but like apply it in so many different contexts, which I think drove value back to the original OPEPN NFTs. And I think that's another piece of the puzzle. But yeah, I think like the part that I love asking a lot of questions. So like GPT's been amazing because I can just ask questions nonstop. It's got actually less good because it prefaces and filters a lot now. But then
Yeah.
Midjourney is like a more fun example because I think most people have amazing imagination, or like maybe more imagination than they give themselves credit for. I think the reason the muscle atrophies is because it can be very hard to express that imagination and communicate it. That's when you have to become really good at talking about it, describing it, or writing it down, or drawing it, or modeling it, or like the skill to translate the image in your mind or the idea in your mind into something that resonates with other people is the really hard part. And I think these AI tools are like drastically lowering the barrier to entry for that. So you're kind of like freeing the ability for people to express more easily, um, which I think is really cool. Um, like there's so many Midjourney images that it's like if I was just to produce one of them pre-AI, I'm gonna have to like be cooking in Photoshop
Yeah.
for like hours, and it's not gonna look as good. Or if it does look as good, it still took me hours or maybe days to get to that point. Um, so I think that's why it's interesting. And then yeah, like on maybe to just kind of like name one of the obvious parts where blockchain like kind of comes in, it's like now that there's such an increasing rate of content and media on chain with a value system that rewards proliferation and sharing and open accessibility, it makes perfect sense that you should start to train models exclusively on things that exist on chain, because there's probably a better value system back to those creators of those pieces of media than in the traditional copyright system, which we know doesn't work here. So that is like the obvious. I almost see just like a huge pit of like pieces of like wood sitting there with gasoline on it. It's just waiting for like the right spark to kind of happen for that to like really click. But yeah, like that's why I think we kind of love like we helped titles with the referencing standard. Like we helped them write the solidity for that. We've helped like Matt and Holly with any and all of their AI experimentations on chain, just because like I think we want to really understand how to make that as easy and as simple as possible. And we've got a lot more that we're doing there. And then it's just something that naturally shows up on chain. Like there's a lot of great Midjourney work that you wouldn't know is Midjourney sometimes, because people start to then edit them in Photoshop and play with them in Illustrator, and they kind of become more integrated into the output. A lot of our like artworks and branding materials like have aspects of Midjourney in it as well. So yeah, but the big I can't remember. I actually don't think I have published this. It's like 8 billion languages. Like I had a really palpable experience where we had 3 acid kids. They're like 3 Russian teens that were like prolific on Zora that we did an internship for like a month. And I didn't know they didn't speak English. And we got on a hangout, and like only one could kind of speak English. So it was like a really interesting translator experience. And I was like, oh wow, like is there a real-time translation tool that's available, so I could speak in English, they could speak in Russian, but we're like perfectly communicating in real time. And it was kind of an aha, because I was like, oh wait, like that probably means that exact same real-time translation will probably happen between 2 people speaking the same language eventually. And it's like, oh wait, this might help bridge the gap even between people who speak the same language ostensibly, and can like help really start to translate into like what I'm saying right now to you. There's probably like a 15% difference that would make it be more clear or more accurate to what I'm really trying to say, and like translate it into things or analogize it into things that would help you really try and see that picture more clearly. So
Yep.
that's like some of the more weird, and like, oh, this probably one of the first stages will just be like translating between languages, but I think it'll just start translating between like everyone. And that's probably just like that's like the funny way to get to telepathic communications is actually just like AI
Yep.
translators between people who speak the same language, which is funny. But yeah, I
Yeah,
don't know how,
no,
but
no, I'm so glad you went there. It is a pleasure. It's always a pleasure talking to you, Jacob. I truly do mean that. But it's like it is uncanny, that example, because when I was in Vietnam at the end of last year, I was in this hotel. It was like a dead zone cell wise, so I couldn't call their version of Uber to get me
mm,
home. And I go in this mall. It's like, countries like that. It's amazing how cities are like that, where like you'll literally have buildings that don't have roofs on them, and then there's like this shiny looking like New York quality mall just like
mhm,
randomly placed there. So I'm like, okay, let me go in here and ask. And nobody spoke any English. And so I was
mhm,
like, I can't get an Uber and I cannot explain to anybody that I need them to call me a taxi. So
mhm,
I'm in that position where I'm like, oh man, I need to figure that out. And it dovetails perfectly into kind of the idea of you and I talking. I feel like I get self-conscious about it sometimes. Some part of my articulating behavior is trying to cover as much surface area as I can with what I say and bring in analogies, because of being aware of that very same thing, that there is going to be some discrepancy in what I'm intending versus what is received when I'm talking to somebody.
mhm,
Um, and I feel like that is the perfect transition into like memes and
mm.
memetics and the idea of like, you know, I forget who it said, like a picture's worth 1,000 words, a meme's worth 1,000 pictures. Like
Uh, yeah, yeah. I think Balaji Srinivasan had the original version of that at least I
yeah,
heard, which was like if a picture's worth 1,000 words, a meme's worth 10,000.
yeah, and it's so
Which
true.
yeah, 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 it
It's
is.
so true. And let me bounce this idea off you actually. So recently I've been kind of like, the bull had started coming back, so my degen side was coming back into play, and I was looking around at meme coins, and we talked about Doge a little bit a while ago, and so I was kind of retracing that and SHIB, and I don't know what is the internet's fascination with the Shiba Inu dog. That's probably a rabbit hole to go down in and of itself, but
Mm,
um, it led me back to this thought line of, in a way, tokenizing content is making a hyper local meme coin.
mhm, mm,
So, in a way, an artist's discography is a fractionalized meme coin of, say, $ light.
mhm, mhm,
So it's like, if that were to get adopted, or if you agree with me, on the majority of that, then it seems likely that eventually my discography or individual pieces of my discography open up to some kind of speculative market.
mm,
But I have
mhm,
no clue what that looks like or what. But I've just like started to have this like intuition of, like, I'm sure if we were able to turn $X copy into a meme coin and it had some relationship with his actual discography, I'm sure there would be, 2 to 5x type of activity on $X copy at this moment
mhm,
compared to X copy's discography.
mhm,
Um, but I guess the twist in that is like, it would be very cool, in my opinion, if there was a way to have that embrace crypto's like self-referential virtue and have $X copy's value being able to have some kind of tie into X copy himself, even if he himself doesn't have to be the custodian of it or
mm,
direct it or anything to do with it, but almost like he has his art layer that he is solely responsible for, and then there's this like speculative meme coin layer that he's not responsible for, but similar to royalties and protocol rewards, he does benefit from.
mm, mhm. Yeah, now we're talking. Well, I guess actually I have an interesting question for a word that you mentioned. Like what does degen mean to you in this
Mm.
context? Like when you say that, like what is that actually, what does that mean?
That's fascinating. off the top of my head, first go, I would say degenning is the embrace of speculation in its most raw form, right? Like no confusion about the act that you're undertaking. It is simply there is an asset that I can speculate on, and so therefore I'm going to play this speculation game. You know, there's nothing else involved in it whatsoever. It's just the most bare bones. There's an agreed upon thing that we can play this liquidity game with. I'm going to play it.
Yeah, like that resonates. I think part of that is, yeah, it's like I am openly and honestly admitting that I have no care other than expressing a belief that the value of this thing is going to change in one direction or another, and that I believe that I can earn value from that expression in some way.
Totally.
Because I think with the X copy and Dogecoin, I think you just drew the exact spectrum I wanted to draw, which is, imagine on one end of the spectrum, there's a super rare one of one. And then on the other end of the spectrum, there is Dogecoin. I think what we've been doing with the space over the past crypto 5 years, aka first 12 days of this year, has been, I think, getting increasing experimentation of like starting at the both extremes and trying to find the equilibrium of those two forces, I think, which is Dogecoin is such a rare case. I'm just going to talk about like maybe the more recent meme coins in general, where they get outsized attention, therefore outsized trading volume, outsized value, but then more often than not, as that attention falls away, so does the value. So they're not a durable thing. But it's interesting that it's a durable phenomenon. And then like the complete value and almost the symbol kind of disappears entirely, and there's nothing really left of it other than, I guess, the trading history. And then on this, let's say on the one of one NFT side, it's very explicit in what it is versus the meme coins are very general. I guess they're explicit in one sense, but like it's a general symbol. It's just like the ticker, and it can be applied and visualized in many ways. Versus a one of one is it's this specific image, and it's just this image. Versus like, Dogecoin kind of mapped to like the one canonical Doge image, but then the library of Doge memes just continued to expand, and it all tied back to that like Doge ticker symbol. And I think there's like a value in that. So I think what's been and like Zora's journey is actually interesting to plot along this, where it's like going from one of ones and then 721 editions to then 1155 editions that are like getting closer and closer to the end of the spectrum. And there's probably, and then if you go to the left again, there's probably like yo-yo and then meme coins generally. And if you go to the left again, Dogecoin is on the other side. But I think Dogecoin is, I can never tell if we're at the peak or not of it. And that's why it's always a mind fuck, because it's like, there's been tens of thousands of cryptocurrencies. I saw this thing where it's like, of the top 100 things on Coin Market Cap or CoinGecko 5 years ago or 10 years ago, only 4 of them remain. And like Dogecoin's one of them. Like it has survived in the raw open market of attention for such a long time that it's like, it is very real on some dimension. But yeah, I guess to like maybe get back to the idea you're putting forward, it does seem like there could be, I guess the way, I think I put this in the predictions thing I wrote. It's like money as a technology is fundamentally being unbundled. Money is like, it's a medium of exchange, unit of account, store of value. I think Uniswap has unbundled the medium of exchange piece. So we're just left with unit of account and store of value. Like if you think of like money as a technology, Uniswap is a better medium of exchange. It allows for liquid bartering. Like money as we know it was a solution to bartering. Now we have liquid bartering to some extent. I think like meme coins feel like they'll probably play a role in unit of account, and getting really diverse units of account. So in your X copy example, like, is it better or worse or more efficient or less efficient for X copy things to be priced in X copies meme coin or like token,
Mm,
um, or not? Like there was a brief moment in that like Pepe week last year where Pepe token was a huge thing, and then some NFTs and mints started getting priced in Pepe tokens
mhm,
specifically, and that felt like a real clue to me. And I think the thing that maybe hampered that was just like gas costs were just so high that we didn't see as much throughput as we should have. But then it also felt less real. But I don't know. I guess like this is a very long-winded way of saying I agree with you that like there is more to multiply between mints and bringing specific things on chain, and then memes and bringing entire beliefs or ideologies or like ideas at large on chain. Like it just feels like they could multiply more. And I think maybe what we're feeling is that the two ends of that spectrum, and as we're like kind of moving inwards from both ends, it does feel like we're actually getting really a lot closer than we have been to like what the combination of those two things could actually look like. Um,
mhm.
uh, yeah, but Dogecoin's a crazy rabbit hole. It might be the purest cryptocurrency in some weird way. Like
I,
it's
I
it's
agree.
known to be, it's known to be a meme. There's no proof of work or anything or like Bitcoin soundness behind it. It's literally just pure meme, and it's
Yeah,
been around for long enough at a high enough value where it's like, what is happening here? How is this happening?
it's
Uh,
unreal.
yeah,
It
it's
it is it's actually why I'm changing my profile pic to it, because I've just kind of like further and further been diving down. And your Pepe thing, that's actually happening. I don't know if you're familiar with Bonk, but it's a
yeah,
Solana
bonk
based
and
one.
then whiff like yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yep.
but Bonk is now trading on like exchange art and marketplaces like Pepe was, where things are getting priced in Bonk. And I went down this weird rabbit hole actually last night. They have a white paper. Like if you go
Mm,
to Bonk's website, I actually think you would get a kick out of it. So if you ever have like 15 minutes, check out Bonk's website, and I think you'd be interested. But it's like I'm reading it, and I'm reading the integrations and this Telegram Bonk bot they made and the revenue that it's producing, and then they're buying their own token back with it so that they can use it for hackathons, and it's like I'm reading this thing and I'm going like, hold up, isn't this a meme coin? Like
mhm.
what is going on here with this thing? Um, and I saw somebody post an artwork, the Incredible Bonk. I'll send it to you in the DMs after we hop off. But
Mm,
Jacob, it's one of the it's one of the coolest artworks I've seen in a while, and it's a dude advertising a meme coin.
right,
So it's
right.
like I'm at this point where I'm going like to your idea of that money is being unbundled. I almost go in a way of like, are we figuring out a way to bundle speculation?
Oh, we're figuring out a way to channel speculation for sure. Um, like yeah. So on the speculation, I think speculation has the worst branding.
Yeah.
It's one of the like worst branded things in the world because we associate it with gambling, sports betting, and then like penny stocks.
Yep.
Um, and I think it's reasonable, like and like lotteries and stuff like that. And I think it's fair that it has horrible branding because they're very unproductive zero sum forms of speculation.
Mhm.
Like they actually don't lead to any progress. Versus if you think of like productive forms of speculation, they usually lead to breakthroughs or like
Exactly.
amazing new things. Like so, this is venture investing, funding scientific research, which can also lead to outsized returns, and like back in the day, like go voyage and discover new countries and stuff like that. But I don't think anyone who is a non-accredited investor in the US has had access to that type of upside or speculation that lets you kind of um, one just like get that upside, but two, those forms of speculation are actually very opinionated, and it allows you to express yourself in very different ways. Like venture investors on some dimension, or angel investors, or even someone who's going to create their own restaurant or a cafe, they're like able to express a point of view in the world with real impact using that capital. And it's like you're shifting the world on tiny little dimensions all the time. But what crypto is doing is it's bringing venture scale returns and the ability to speculate on things much earlier than has been accessible, I think, in a very long time, where it's revealing extreme forms of like degen. So it's like the casino side is actually getting 10 times louder, but the more quiet story is like, oh wait, like this is allowing people to speculate on things that have never been able to be speculated on before to some extent. And then it gets even muddied further when there are things that there's, a whole universe of things you can do in crypto that like aren't necessarily speculation. You're just kind of like getting new forms of utility as well. So it's like, it's hard to pass, but I feel like, yeah, it's about I think speculation has always been there, and there's like a base level of speculative demand. It just gets channeled into really unproductive things where it has to go looking for something. So it ends up in sports betting or gambling or like lottery tickets or like growth stocks that are way past their early stage, or penny stocks or whatever. So yeah, that's how I always like to. So I think like meme coin, one of the things that meme coin activity recently is kind of like how I've been thinking about it is that like, oh wow, there is an excess, like there is excess demand for volatility and things to speculate on, but there is not enough supply of things to apply that. And meme coins are always going to catch the excess to some extent. Yeah. Which is,
sorry.
Yeah. No, I think that's the end of the thought.
It sparks a couple ideas, which is like, and I actually, to be forthright, until like the past couple of years, had a same bad taste in my mouth of the term speculation, and have since being in crypto, it has 180'd, and in a way, speculation is imagination in a sense, right?
Yeah.
Like,
right.
Even when you're trying to pick your partner, you're speculating at the beginning, and it's like, to that point, I was going to ask you, it was one of the things I thought in my head about asking you today. And it kind of ties in here where I go like, on the creator side of things, the reward is usually ad revenue, right? Like if you look at YouTubers, podcasters, comedians who have podcasts, etc., it is getting metrics to a leverageable point and then doing a sheath underwear or manscaped ad read and getting paid for your audience that you've amassed. And then comedians have a little bit of or musicians where they can go live and capture audiences that way. But when you think about like visual artists or people that are producing natively on chain, which essentially kind of gets typecast into being a visual artist, even if they aren't necessarily only making visual art, I go, what is the ad revenue, paradigm shift here? And I guess in a way, these tangents are kind of hovering near each other. Where I'm going is enabling the speculation layer, because in a way, sorry, this is so chaotic, I'm parsing out in real time. In a way, advertisers choosing who to advertise with is speculation. So here I go, is there a way to tie the non-productive, 99th percentile speculation crowd onto, the I just want to make art, I'm not interested in the other mumbo jumbo, left side? And is there a way to kind of use what Friend Tech kind of showed us for a moment of like, there's a way to let speculation and utility, creativity based, asset content production, is there a way to overlap them so that speculators have their way to have fun and play the game, but in a way it also substitutes ad rev for creators that get to a certain threshold? I have no clue if that's crazy or not, but that's kind of what you said made me think just now.
I think so. Yeah, I would say like right now, like the meme coin side is just the pure fire hose or like tidal wave of energy that can either, I don't think it's powering dams quite yet. It just kind of powers through shit. And more often than not breaks things. I think building good products or like long-term durable things is probably like how do you start to channel it in more interesting I think it's actually about like muting. It's like it's finding the right balance of like allowing it to happen, but not allowing it to like kill the thing. Because
Mm-hmm.
I think degens can very easily kill things, but if there's like some balance where it's like, oh, there's not too much too soon, like it's not too liquid too soon in some
Mm-hmm.
cases. Like I think like illiquidity is as much a feature as it can be a bug in a lot of cases. So it's like that's one of the ways that you can temper and filter out a lot of this stuff. But yeah, I think I'd imagine if we looked up like 5 or 10 years from now, like, and we're speaking specifically about like the creativity side, I could imagine it's like we have new forms of the record label or movie studio or publishing or gallery models that are explicitly like they are institutions that are funding the production of things that they think are going to really resonate or not. I think those types of models will start to find themselves on chain. But I think where we are right now in part is just like, the movie studio can rely on IP and copyright system that they're very familiar with. They understand the business model, they understand the rights, they understand like what ownership actually means, and how to build businesses around it. We're like literally starting at square one of like, well, this is the internet native form of like a
Mm-hmm.
trademark or a copyright, and here's how the value system works, and here's how it's really different. Um, and we're at even earlier stage where it's like we're only just now starting to actually see like a meaningful amount of really cool media and information and content actually come on chain natively into that form of like ownership basically. um so it's like if there is any speculation, it's probably more analogous to buying a band t-shirt at a concert or like a vinyl record, um or a limited edition print where it's like you're supporting that creator. And there is a good chance that if you're right, the thing that you've got is like rare on some dimension, or like, a pair of old Air Jordans or something like that on StockX. Like you can see the blend of those two, and it kind of
Mm-hmm.
feels at like that stage. But I could definitely see a version of the future where it gets earlier and earlier into the creative process, where you can start to more proactively support and help new things get created versus taking the thing on chain after it's created. So I think like that'll be a theme and an area of interest, which kind of comes back to like the crowdfunding example that you brought up with titles and fabric with like the AI model. Like I think they're starting to push earlier into the creative life cycle, and that gets um, more. I think you can make that more speculative if you want to, or there's the Kickstarter end of the spectrum where it's like I just really want the thing that's on the other side of it,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is where they're at right now.
Awesome. You got time for one more?
Yeah.
All right. So I've been thinking about this too. I wonder what you think. So there are so many iconic photos of sports moments or historical moments that either the photographers have already passed on or they're at an age where they'll likely never put it on chain.
Mm,
So what do we think happens there? Because I've even thought about just starting creating a contract and then just minting all of them and not having them for sale. So that way
mm,
that they're just there. But I think like there's a whole swath of stuff that'll never make its way on chain, but should definitely be put on chain.
mhm. I agree with that. I guess the first point would be if you have specific photographers and examples in mind, um, you might be surprised that they actually might want to bring it on chain. so,
True, true.
so maybe if you've got a list, like let's catch up and actually see if we can make one of them a reality. Because I'm sure you'd be really surprised.
Mm,
Um, um, and then two, the more general point. So like, let's say we're talking about like Vermeers from like um, completely different eras,
Yeah.
or like, artworks from hundreds of years ago, how like they probably should be on chain. The question is then, I guess I floated the thought experiment with you in a DM, I'm remembering now, where it's like, assume every single person on the internet minted the Mona Lisa. Which address, which person would get the most amount of mints and why? And I think my best answer to that question ended up being, after thinking about it, I think it's probably the Louvre would probably see the most amount of mints. The more funny one would be like maybe Kim Kardashian or something like that, for whatever reason. Like I could also see her being in the top 5 for sure. But yeah, for anything in the public domain, it probably really makes sense for it to go on chain, because this is a way for you to have something in the public domain and have value capture. Like that's actually a 0 to 1 moment for information. It's just like, well, yeah, like I think there probably is an institution that could be created that's museum-esque or library-esque that could just bring these on chain. And maybe none of them are actually able to be minted and there's no ETH flowing through it.
Right.
But it's more interesting to think about, well, what would be the acceptable conditions where you could have ETH flowing through it? And maybe that ETH is spent in further preservation, or like really guaranteeing long-term pinning and archiving of the digital formats and stuff like that. Or even like selling hard drives of the backups of the entire archives. You know what I mean? Like I think there could be really interesting ways to like bridge the gap there, which I've thought about a lot. I actually think I created a profile on Zora called the Ethereum Public Library already, like playing with this idea.
Great name. Great name.
With like a little note memo that I did over the holiday break. It was one of a few like concepts I was playing with, but yeah, I think they should be on chain. It's just how to do it right, because there's so many easy cases where you just get eviscerated in the court of public opinion on Twitter, which I think is net bad for everyone.
Yeah, it's just like, I'm right there with you. It's like the meme I've been having in my head for a while is like Library of Alexandria. It's like we should just get it on chain so it's preserved. Like this is like human memory in a sense. Like let's get it up there. Like let's not have it disappear. But yeah, the outrage and the accusations of trying to like make money on someone else's work and all that stuff would just be like a headache. But then you also deal with, I think it's 72 years before stuff's in the public domain. So eventually everything's going in the public domain.
Eventually, yes. But I think even still, and I guess we saw this with the Steamboat Willie, Mickey Mouse stuff coming to the public domain for the first time, where like it does resonate when it's on chain, but like I think it needs to be positioned and packaged. And I think if there is ETH coming through, it should probably be going through for the specific goal of like doing this really well and seriously and thoughtfully, versus just like not doing that. Yeah, but then part of me is like, is that what I want to be true, or is that actually true? And like everyone should just be YOLO minting this stuff, and then we really start to learn the model for real. I don't know. It's always a good question to ask. It's like, do you want it to be true, or is it actually true? It's one of the harder ones. So I'm not sure.
Nothing we receive is brand new, it's just newer. While brothers drop down to their knees and make newer popsicle sticks race down the curb into the sewer. The next American hangman sketched in crayon.